The rain wasn't falling in Vienna so much as hanging in the air, a cold gray mist that blurred the edges of the tarmac at Vienna International Airport. It was July 9, 2010, a day devoid of natural light, the sky pressing down like a leaden blanket. On the far side of the airfield, away from the commercial terminals, two unmarked planes sat silent and dark, their engines cold. One was a Russian Federal Security Service, FSB aircraft. The other belonged to the United States Department of Justice. Between them, on the damp asphalt, stood a cluster of figures, their breaths forming small ghosts in the chill. This was not a diplomatic meeting. This was the closing scene of a decade-long symphony of betrayal, a silent, grim transaction known only to a handful of people on the planet. They called it Operation Ghost Stories. The story doesn't start on a rainy tarmac, but in the sun-drenched suburbs of New Jersey. 20 years earlier, the Soviet Union had collapsed. The Iron Curtain was in tatters. In Washington and Langley, there was a triumphant, if cautious, optimism. A new Russia was emerging. But in a nondescript office at the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, a veteran analyst named Kate, her eyes tired from years of staring at fuzzy photographs and intercepted cables, felt a different kind of chill. The political war was over. The shadow war, she knew, never ends. It simply adapts. They didn't shut down the residentura at the embassy. She'd muttered to her partner, a man named Leo who smoked too much and trusted too little. They just told them to work harder. Her warning was a whisper in a corridor of cheers. And so, the SVR, the successor to the KGB's foreign intelligence arm, began to plant seeds. Not in the classic mold of dead drops in parks or brush passes on crowded streets. Those were too risky in the new age of digital surveillance. Their plan was deeper, slower, more patient. They would build not just agents, but lives. They called them asterisk illegals, asterisk deep cover operatives, living under stolen or fabricated Western identities, embedding themselves into the fabric of American society, not to steal specific documents, but to become part of the landscape, to listen, to blend, to be invisible. In Montclair, New Jersey, a couple named Richard and Cynthia Murphy were the picture of suburban success. He was in finance. She was a realtor. They had two young daughters who attended soccer practice and birthday parties. They hosted barbecues, argued about property taxes, made small talk in the checkout line. Their home was filled with the clutter of a happy life, school projects, lawn chairs, a dog. But in a hidden compartment of a sealed desktop computer, Richard Murphy, whose real name was Vladimir Goryev, kept a shortwave radio. On a preset schedule, deep in the night when his family slept, he would listen for a burst of encrypted digital noise from Moscow Center. The messages were embedded in seemingly innocuous images on public websites. The instructions were mundane. Asterisk, establish closer contact with political sources. Asterisk, report on Wall Street sentiment. Asterisk, the goal was amorphous, which made it all the more sinister. They were sleeper agents, human tripwires for a conflict that might never come. Across the river in New York City, a charismatic journalist named Anna Chapman, a fiery redhead with a taste for entrepreneurship and high society parties, ran an online real estate business from a sleek Manhattan apartment. She was a networker, a vibrant presence on the downtown scene. She used her charm to befriend politicians, bankers, anyone with a whisper of influence. Unbeknownst to her new friends, she possessed a sophisticated laptop equipped with special software that could turn it into a clandestine radio, allowing her to communicate directly with a Russian official just by sitting near him in a coffee shop. The technology was bold, almost arrogant. It left a footprint, and they were not alone. In Boston, a university professor and his wife; in Arlington, a travel agent; in Seattle, a freelance writer, all living seemingly ordinary American lives, all reporting to Moscow. They formed a network, but a silent one. They didn't know each other. They were individual cells in a phantom body. For years, they lived this double existence. They paid their taxes. They celebrated Thanksgiving. They mourned their parents back in Russia, whom they could never truly see again. The psychological toll was a slow poison. One of the illegals, known as Michael Zotoli, would later confess in a quiet, hollow voice to his FBI interrogators. You look in the mirror every morning, and you don't know who is looking back. The atmosphere inside the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, room 4830 at the Hoover Building, was one of perpetual twilight. The windows, when not covered by blinds, looked out onto a city that had no idea the war was still being fought. The air was stale with the smell of old coffee, burnt microwave popcorn, and tension. Here, a dedicated team, led by agents like Kate and Leo, chased ghosts. They had fragments, a suspicious financial transfer from a Cyprus-based shell company to a New Jersey housewife, an anomalous burst of radio frequency energy recorded near the Russian UN mission, a pattern of coincidental encounters between an ambitious journalist and a Pentagon staffer at various DC cocktail parties. It was painstaking, tedious work, connecting dots that seemed determined to remain unconnected. They would stare at timelines plastered across entire walls, photographs of unsmiling faces, maps threaded with colored yarn. These aren't spies, a young analyst named Chris said one night, rubbing his eyes. They're just people. Leo crushed his cigarette in an overflowing ashtray. That's what makes them dangerous, he grunted. A file you can lock in a safe, a neighbor you invite for a beer. That's a vulnerability you can't quantify. The breakthrough came not from a heroic infiltration, but from a catastrophic mistake by Moscow Center itself. Following the arrest of a high-ranking SVR officer turned defector in the late 2000s, the FBI gained access to a treasure trove of information. Among the data were the real identities and communications protocols for the entire illegal network. It was the Rosetta Stone. Suddenly, the Murphys, Chapman, the professor in Boston, their covers were blown wide open on a classified server in Virginia. The FBI now faced an agonizing decision: roll them up immediately, or watch and learn. They chose to watch. For nearly 2 years, the ghosts were placed under the most intensive surveillance in FBI history. Their homes were wired, their cars were bugged. Every coffee purchase, every school run, every late-night radio transmission was monitored from a fleet of unmarked vans in rented apartments nearby. The agents observed the crushing normalcy of their targets. Lives the arguments about money, the parent-teacher conferences, the quiet despair in Cynthia Murphy's eyes as she helped her daughters with homework, all while knowing she was lying to them about everything. The hunters began to feel a strange, uncomfortable empathy. These were not monsters. They were pawns in a game so vast they probably never saw the board. The tension in the surveillance vans was a physical thing, a low hum beneath the static of the headphones. An agent listening to Richard Murphy send a coded message would watch, on a monitor, his daughter practice piano in the next room. The dissonance was jarring. He's transmitting. The agent would whisper into his mic. In the command center, Kate would close her eyes. She wasn't just managing an operation. She was presiding over the slow-motion destruction of families. We have to remember, she told her team, her voice steel, the moment they got on the plane, they made a choice. The kids didn't. The order to arrest came down on a Sunday in June 2010. It was coordinated across multiple states. A series of perfectly timed, silent strikes designed to prevent any warning. In Arlington, agents approached a man walking his dog. Michael Zotoli. The man froze, the leash going slack in his hand. He didn't run. He just nodded, a profound weariness settling over his features. In New Jersey, the Murphys were arrested in their home. The scene was devastatingly quiet. The children were with a neighbor, a planned playdate that now served as a cruel courtesy. Cynthia Murphy, hands cuffed behind her back, looked at the family photos on the mantel as she was let out, her face a mask of utter ruin. In Manhattan, Anna Chapman was meeting an undercover FBI agent posing as her Russian handler in a coffee shop. When she realized the game was up, the fiery confidence drained from her face, leaving behind the pale, scared woman she truly was. The interrogations were not confrontational. They were confessional, held in sterile, dimly lit rooms. The illegals, stripped of their fabricated identities, seemed almost relieved. The burden of 2 decades of lies was too heavy to carry anymore. They spoke of their training, their loneliness, their fear. They spoke of their children. A deal was being forged in the highest echelons of the US and Russian governments. A swap. 10 ghosts for 4 real people, Western assets imprisoned in Russia, including a courageous physicist named Alexander Zaporozhky and a weary Kremlin insider named Sergei Skripal, which brings us back to the reign in Vienna. On the tarmac, the swap was conducted with cold, bureaucratic efficiency.